to Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw, and that would be the WWE Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And when you introduce this next gentleman, this Hall of Famer, all you got to say is the match. Everyone knows what you're talking about. WrestleMania 3, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Randy Macho Man Savage. Been called the greatest match of all time, and he is one of the greatest people of all time, certainly one of the greatest champions of all time. He's our friend Ricky Steamboat. Dragon, welcome to the show.
JBL, it's good to see you. I figured out how you stay so young looking.
How's that?
I want to know the color that you use in your hair.
Hey,
well,
Ricky,
when I get the
he has secrets that he won't tell, but I called him when we very first started doing this show. I called him and he had to confess to me what he does. I mean,
yeah,
you know, he's just not a pretty boy by accident. You know, it's a, like Terry Funk used to say, it's a chemical world, brother. It's a chemical world.
You know, whenever he says something, he always repeats it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a chemical world, brother. It's a chemical world. He always says it twice.
I'll be like
Ricky. Welcome in, man. We've been wanting to get you on, and we've been trying to build an audience fit for you to come on, and we're getting to that point, man. And you know, it's so great to see you. You know, before the show, you was telling us a little bit about your heritage and all that stuff. I know. I got some questions on how that, you know, now I kind of know because of the pre-story, but kind of fill me in how the Dragon all started, and Ricky Steamboat went from Richard Blood to Ricky Steamboat.
All right, real quick. My dad was in the Army. He joined 1945, right towards the end of the Second World War. He met my mom in Japan in 49. They got married in 50, and I came along in 53, but when he met her in Japan, it was on a blind date, and my mom did not know how to speak English, and my dad didn't know how to speak Japanese, and it was a blind date. I guess they headed off, ended up getting married, and when he came back to the States, he was stationed at West Point, New York, and I was born at West Point at the academy there in 1953. So I know Eddie Graham gave me the Ricky Steamboat name. I don't know if you know that story, Gerald.
Yes, I do. I was there.
That's right. You were sitting in the office.
I walked in and I said, Ricky Blood.
I want to show you something, and Gerald would know this guy. I don't know. Can you? All right, let me take it out.
At Ricky's Sammy Steamboat.
That's Sammy Steamboat. Yep.
Wow.
I recognize the ears.
Yeah, I walked into the office 1976, and Eddie looked at me, and my last name is Blood, and he goes, I started in business 1975, went through Vern Gagne's camp. I was the class.
Ricky, how did you get from you were state champion at Gulfport or Gulf Breeze High School in St. Petersburg? How did you get? Was it military move again that you had to make a move to go to Minneapolis?
No, I went to Bogasaga High School in St. Pete, and at the time, I was dating a girl out of high school, and she went to Minneapolis to be a flight attendant for Northwest. And her roommate was Donna Gagne, Vern's daughter. And so they got to be real close, being in this, roommates going through the school. And her name was Maureen. She was invited over to Gagne's house for dinner. And, they just talk. And, you got a boyfriend? She said, yes. And what's he doing? What's his name? And she said, his name's Richard Blood. Well, all the way up in Minneapolis, Vern Gagne recognized the name. And she says, well, how do you know that name? He says, well, Eddie told me that he's a pretty good amateur wrestler down in Florida, because Richard Blood wrestled against Mike Graham in high school.
Wow.
I'll never forget that day.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Mike was a senior and I was a sophomore. He was 2 years up on me, and we were in the district finals. You had to win district to go to state. And we're in the finals, and I'm a sophomore, and you know, to make it into the finals as a sophomore. So I'm standing in there in the squared circle, and I'm looking across, and over to my right, I see this man stand up and start yelling, Mike, you can beat him. Go. And he's got bandages on his head, you know, the white bandages on his head and the blonde hair. And I look over and I said, oh my God, that's Eddie Graham. And I'll tell you the story how I know who he is. But he says, Mike, you can beat him, son. So I look up and I look at Mike, and I know in the wrestling brackets, it's Gossip.
Right.
His real last name. But, you know, for wrestling, Eddie has Graham, right? So I said, oh my God, that's Eddie Graham's son. But I didn't know that when you're going through the brackets. Long story short, Mike beat me on points. He went on to state. And my senior year, I went on to state. So now we're fast forward this was 1969 when I was a sophomore. So fast forward 1976 is when I'm in let me back up. 1975 is when Maureen said that this wrestling promoter up here, Vern Gagne, remembers your name. How could you forget the last name of Blood, right? You know, Blood. So she said, Vern remembers you because of Eddie spoke highly of you following your amateur career. So, and as you know, the old timers were pretty big on amateur wrestlers.
Right.
Yeah, right. You know, you and your brother Jack. So never got the recognition in a college level, but you know, she told me that. And at the time I was selling door-to-door Kirby vacuum cleaners. Door-to-door Kirby vacuum cleaners.
So wait a minute. This big jacked up bodybuilder is going door to door selling Kirby vacuum cleaners. I mean, these
Yes.
housewives either had to be in love with you or scared to death.
Oh God, you know, here it is in Florida in the month. I did it for 2 years, and as you know, in the month of August, you're walking down up and you pick a neighborhood, you start pounding on doors. You're wearing a suit and a tie, and it's 100 degrees, and you got your vacuum cleaner in one hand, you got your little briefcase in the other hand, and you're knocking on doors asking for a free demonstration. So anyway, I did it for 2 years, and it wasn't bad. You know, we were at that time, we were getting $100 a sale. So I would try to get 3 sales under my belt, like, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, maybe try and get one a day, make $300 or $400. And then on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you see me at the beach. So anyway, she told me that Vern had a wrestling school, a camp, and so he just said, hey, have him send me some pictures and you know, a bio, resume. And so I did that. In 1975, I got a starting date in November. I'll never forget, November 16th, 1975. That was the starting date. And so a couple of months ahead of time, I told my parents I was going to Minneapolis and going to go do this, go into pro wrestling. And so I just threw clothes in the back of my car and drove up to Minneapolis and got a little studio apartment and showed up. And Khosrow Vaziri was our coach. The Iron Sheik.
Cheeky baby.
Yeah, he wasn't the Iron Sheik at the time, but you know, I think Vern brought him over maybe he was there maybe a year and a half, 2 years into Minneapolis from Iran, and at one time he was the bodyguard to the Shah. He was a gold medalist at the Pan American Games. He was their national champion. I think he took a bronze at the Olympics. He was a pretty tough character. Soaking wet at that time, he was 185 pounds. And the first day, I'll never forget, the first day of school, we had 16 guys show up. 16. And then it went Monday through Friday. It went from 10 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. We never got in the ring one time, not once. Khosrow, or the Sheik, had us doing calisthenics for 5 hours. We were in the basement of Burns' office building, and he had the top floor. He had the penthouse floor. It was 20 stories. And the first thing Khosrow had us do was run the stairs. Now, from the basement to the top, it was 21 flights. So we all did that and came back down. And then Khosrow paired us off according to our size and weight. And then he had us fireman carry your partner up 21 flights.
What was you weighing then, Ricky?
Huh?
What was your weight then?
I weighed in at about 230.
So you're pretty jacked.
Well, in correspondence with my girlfriend, I was able to get about 6 months of lead time. So I was working out 3 times a week with the weights, and then I would go to St. Pete Beach 3 times a week and run in the sand. And I picked a spot where I'd park my car, and I'd run 2.5 miles up to this pier and get a coffee. It'd be early in the morning, and then run 2.5 miles back to the car. And I did that 3 times a week. So, not a pat on the back for me, but I would say out of the 16 guys, I was the best cardio shape guy.
Did you have any of those the guys like Patera or any of those guys cross through, or was you in there basically, you made it basically through your own?
I never saw Flair. Now, Patera, Flair, Brunzell, and Greg Gagne, they were and Khosrow, they were the class before me.
Okay.
I remember Patera coming down to the basement one time just to take a look-see. Greg Gagne, of course, being Vern's son, he was down there all the time. So after we got finished running the stairs, and then after we carried your partner up and you dropped them at the top and you ran back down, then he would carry you up and then run back down. Then one of you would drop down to your hands and knees, and your partner would grab your ankles, and then you had the wheelbarrow up on your hands, 21 flights.
Wow.
Oh
And
my God.
you get to the top, and then you come down, and then you switch, and then you grab your partner's ankles, and he would wheelbarrow up 21 flights on his hands. It was, oh my God.
How many made it? Ricky, out of 16, how many made it with the wheelbarrow up 21 flights of stairs?
Everybody made it, but like I said, class was from 10 to 3, and there were guys that could make it up 1 or 2 flights, and then they would collapse. But the Sheik was so relentless; he would be yelling and screaming at them, and if it just took one step at a time, he was relentless until the guy made it to the top. So, for that first week, it pretty much took almost 5 hours for us to do all our calisthenics and do the stairs 3 times. And that was Monday through Friday. We had the weekend off. And I remember my face. I had so many red scuff marks on my face because we were in a fire escape stairwell with the cement floor steps. And my arms would give out, and I would catch the corner of a step on my head or my cheek, so I had raspberries all over my face. The following week on a Monday morning, 4 of us showed up. The dozen quit. They quit. And the 4 guys, me, Buck Zumhoff, for his story, he's in jail. And Scott Irwin.
Wild Bill's brother.
Yes. And he passed away because he had a cancerous tumor or something behind his eye, and it went into his brain. And then the other guy was Jan Nelson. I know that name's not familiar to any of you guys, but
Was that Private Nelson, right?
no,
No.
no. Jan Nelson was a Minnesota boy. His father owned a bar across the street from the University of Minnesota. Jan was a big boy. He was about 6'4", about 280. He was a power lifter. He was third in the nation. And Jan passed away. He got into the business, and he was wrestling for Vern. And the story that I hear is that he went to a Rolling Stones concert and OD'd sitting in the bathroom stall in Chicago at the concert, and that's where they found him, Jan Nelson. So out of the four, you got one guy in jail, and then you got me.
And the other two early deaths.
So yeah, and so when I came down to Florida in 1976, I walked in the office, and Eddie Graham says, "I remember you, kid. You know, when you were in high school, you wrestled Mike." He says, "Rick Blood's a great wrestling name," but he said, "That's for heels. Blood, that's for heels." He said, "I'd like to call you Ricky Steamboat. We had a guy here in the late 60s and through the early 70s that campaigned here. His name was Sammy Steamboat. He was from Hawaii. And I'm going to start putting your name out there, but I'm not going to call you his son. I'm going to start listing you as a nephew. You're the nephew of Sammy Steamboat." So I'll never forget, first night, I went to the office on Tuesday. Wednesday night, we're in West Palm Beach. I'm the first match. I'm in the ring. I'm in the corner. They're doing old school announcing. The announcer's in the middle of the ring with the mic. And he announces, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a substitute this evening taking the place of Dick Blood. Give it up for the nephew of the great Sammy Steamboat, Ricky Steamboat." And the crowd jumped out of the seats. I went like, holy moly, what the, prior to that, whenever they announced Dick Blood, when I worked for Vern up there in Minneapolis, I get beaten 2 or 3 minutes, and I get a couple of claps out of the house. But then when I went to Florida, just because of the name change, the fans, they must have loved Sammy dearly because they jumped out of their seats. So about a month later, Eddie pulls me back in the office and he says, "Son, you're getting a great response." And I said, "Well, it's not because of my work." I said, "I'm just getting a rub off of Sammy Steamboat, the name. That's the response, the reason." He says, "Well, anyway," he says, I told him a story when I first went in the office. And when I was in high school in St. Pete, me and the guys on the wrestling team from the high school would drive over to Tampa on Tuesday nights at the Armory. And we'd sit there at front row with Bogus Egg high school wrestlers, on our jerseys, right? And we'd go, "We're the real deal. You guys are a bunch of phony balonies." We'd be sitting razzing them, not knowing that 5 years later, here I am, right? So Eddie goes, do you remember if when Sam and I were wrestling tag team?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." I said, "You guys were the Florida tag team champions." He said, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to team you and Mike up. And it's going to be Steamboat and Graham all over again, second generation." And the following week on TV, we were in the ring with the Hollywood Blondes with Sir Oliver Humperdinck as their manager. And we wrestled to, I forget what the time limit was on TV. Gerald, do you remember what time limit was for TV in Florida?
You had 10-minute time limit, Gordon.
And we wrestled,
unless you were the last match, it was TV time remaining.
There you go, right. And I remember some of the finishes, before the finish would happen, they'd go off the air.
Right.
And then the following weekend, when they'd bring the new show, they'd bring up the last part of that match, leave everybody sort of in suspense. I thought that was very cool. But anyway, we wrestled the Hollywood Blondes. Sir Oliver was their manager. And Mike and I wrestled them to a 10-minute draw on TV. And the next thing you know, we got Mike Graham and Steamboat wrestling against the Hollywood Blondes for the Florida Tag Team Championship. And all of a sudden I'm in the main events. And I've, been in the business 3 months.
Were you ever worried? Were you ever worried? Because when I first broke in the business, Gary Hart, the great manager, was doing color commentary, and he wanted to help me out as well. So he said, I think this kid is Barry Windham's cousin, and just made it up on the fly. And, it gave me a little bit of rub. And I always wondered, because knew I was going to run into Barry Windham sooner or later. I didn't create it. Gary Hart did. That I was ripping off Barry's name. Did you ever think that you might have heat with Sammy Steamboat? Well,
as Gerald knows this, some of the old timers can be a little bit salty, right? They can be a little bit of salty if you're trying to do a family relationship or getting a rub off the name. Maybe they're thinking you didn't earn it. Guys were campaigning their names for 20, 25 years, Eddie told me not to worry about that. Sammy was a true good guy. And you know something, John, I never met Sam Steamboat.
Really?
But I never met him. But while I was in the Carolinas, I got a letter that was sent to Crockett's office, addressed to me, and it was from Sam. And in so many words, it stated, he says, I know you and I have never met. I've heard good stuff about you. I am happy that you are carrying the name with respect and you're doing well. So
that's awesome.
I got a thumbs up from him.
And I think I got to tell you, I came into Florida in 1969. Steamboat, Sammy was just finishing up his career.
Yes.
And so I got to see some of those final matches, and what you're saying about the name. When he would walk, he was Polynesian, so he was a real striking person. He really took good care of us. His work was, you couldn't Eddie couldn't have come up with a better name. And I remember some of the conversations they were trying to come up with some of those hokey Hawaiian names like Kotiki, like Rocky, like Maivia got hung with in the beginning of his career. And Eddie was bright enough to see the talent. Ricky Richard Blood said no. He said, "You're going to be a Steamboat. You're going to be." I remember that just like it was yesterday. Right. But Sammy had so much respect, not only in the ring, but outside the ring by the citizens of the state of Florida, because he was Eddie was trying to build a business, John, at that time. So as Ricky can tell you, Eddie was all about community service.
Big time.
He would have these guys out. So Sammy was one of those spokesmen because, he's a guy that came from the islands and he had made it, so he was a great spokesman. Anytime Eddie would do any billboard signage and everything, Sammy Steamboat was the face of the company, not Eddie Graham, but Sammy Steamboat.
Yeah.
And then, I remember that, but you could have been Kotiki.
Right.
If Eddie had been there and had that vision of what you could do there. That's the reason you had that admiration so much. And none of the guys that I can recall, because I was right in the middle of it, ever held it. Most of them wanted to know if it was a shoot because you resembled in the ring and outside the ring, the great Sammy Steamboat.
Well, you say that, Gerald, because you wouldn't believe the number of guys that were either finishing up their career or they would come up and say, "Boy, I knew your dad, and what a great man he was," and I'd have to square up with them, and tell them the story how I got the name, and Eddie just billed me as his nephew. But they all, a dozen times or more throughout my life, they would come up and say, "Man, I knew Sammy. Well, I knew your dad. What a great man."
So from Florida there, you team up with Mike, and you guys have a pretty good run with the Hollywood Blondes. That was
right.
Jerry Brown and Garvin at the time, right? that incarnation, or was it Garvin, Ronnie Garvin, and Jerry?
No, it wasn't Ronnie.
Must have been Terry Garvin.
Jerry Brown and God, you know,
They were a hot tag team. They were a hot.
They were hot. Yeah, yeah. I was only there for maybe like 3 or 4 months, Gerald.
I know we sent you out because after that little run with Mike there, they really didn't have anything, and then and we didn't want to see you get beat every week on TV. So that's when they basically.
Well, Eddie kept coming up to me and said, "Jim Barnett wants you up in Atlanta."
Well, Jim had seen you in one of those Miami shows, and of course, Dimsey really liked what he saw and wanted you on that Atlanta TV.
So I wasn't there my first month when I was approached with that Eddie said, you know, Jim Barnett would like for you to go to Atlanta, and he's going to take care of you. You know, you're going to do good there. And at that time, I said, Eddie, you know, I just come back home. I've only been back to Florida for a month from being up in Minneapolis and all that. And I said, if I can stay a little longer, I appreciate it. You know, and he said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. I'll talk to Jim. But, you know, 2 or 3 months later, he just said, Jim's pressing on it. He said, he'd like to have you up there in Atlanta. So I was just in Florida 3 or 4 months, and then I drove up to Atlanta and started there.
Hey, Ricky, during this time, when was your bodybuilding career? Because you won several trophies. And did you ever think, you know, because Pumping Iron came out, I guess, 77, right when you started.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about going into bodybuilding? Because it
got
really popular at that time with Arnold and Franco.
No, I never thought about doing pro bodybuilding. I started in 1979 when I went to the Carolinas, and it was mostly on a state or regional level, never on a national level. I didn't have the genetics to be a contender on a national level. So,
were you doing it? Were you doing it, but kind of expand your pro wrestling career, or were you doing it just because it was kind of a passion and you wanted to do it on the side?
It was a passion I wanted to do on the side. I always took pride in trying to stay in good shape, but I never wanted to use bodybuilding as something to further my wrestling career. You know, I relied on my work rate to do that. And bodybuilding was just like a little side hobby, maybe something on my bucket list I wanted to check off. Yeah, so.
And I saw an interview you did where you beat Jimmy Snuka in one of the finals of a bodybuilding contest, right? Where was that?
That was that was in Charlotte. It was called I got a picture of that hanging on the wall. I'll show you guys. The WBBG Southern States Championship for North and South Carolina. And the judges brought Snuka and me out to do a side-by-side because the points were so close. And at the end of the night, they gave me the nod and I got the trophy right here. I'll show it to you guys. But yeah, that was and through that whole time, everybody in Crockett Promotions, this was around 79, knew that I was training to be in that contest, but nobody knew. Snuka didn't tell anybody. That Saturday morning, he shows up and I said, Jimmy, he said, yeah, he says, I'm going to compete. But he was as a lot of people that knew Jimmy, he was very much into keeping it to himself on a lot of issues. And
so he'd been training for the same contest. He'd been seeing you in the dressing room, but he told you nothing about it.
Nothing about it. Never said a word.
And then you two end up in the finals.
Yes. Yeah, we Saturday morning prejudge, and then that evening the big show in the evening, for the pose off and pose downs. So.
Did Crockett use that on television or anything?
No, not that I know of. No.
Why not? I mean, that seems like something that you'd want to put on television.
Yeah, I think it would have been great PR for both me and Snuka.
But Crockett
nowadays they'd be all over it. Whoever's TV you would happen to be working for.
Yeah, they'd get you posing on stage, but then also they get a lot of backstage stuff going on.
But business was such a different atmosphere back in those days, wasn't it, Rick? I mean, everything. I mean, even some of your private life was, pretty much your private life. And if you were doing
Right.
something, I mean, you didn't know about it. I mean, the guys, I know, I was doing coaching, and they don't talk about it, but except here in Florida, where Eddie had everything out there. But the old school, like Jim Crockett and some of those old school guys, whatever you did in your private life, it was kept that way.
Yeah, and you can see how today's way of promoting a guy is that I think it's great because you branch out of pro wrestling into all the different avenues that this wrestler's doing, whether he's a car guy, right? There's, a lot of guys are into collecting cars. And I mean, look at John Cena. I think he's got 75 or 100 cars in his place, it's great. I'm a car guy too. And I started, I did some drag racing at the Sunshine Speedway in St. Pete. And
Soley used to own that, John.
What's that?
Gordon Soley used to own a part of that.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah. And it used to go down to Bradenton.
That's how he started. He was the announcer. He was the announcer, Ricky, for Sunshine Speedway. And one of the guys heard him announcing. One of the TV production guys heard him announcing out there and told Eddie about him. And Eddie brought him in and tried him out. And of course, the rest is history.
Oh, wow. Look how he got started, right? Yeah. So I've got a car now that I take to the drag strip up here in Knoxville. The season's over now, but it starts back up in spring. I got an 07 Mustang. It's 14, 15 years old. And
what do you race? What distance?
In Knoxville, it's just an 1/8 mile. I have to go to Brisco for the 1/4 mile, but it's a pretty stout little car. Dynoed out at about 805 horsepower, 805, and yeah, she gets on down there pretty well. Even though it's an 07, I surprised a lot of the guys with some of the newer Mustangs, the Shelbys, and some of the newer stuff with what they call the Coyote motors in them and everything else. And
is it one of those Jack Rouse specials?
It's not. The car is made by a company out of Southern California called Saleen, Saleen. It's an upper tier Mustang along with the Roush's and the Shelbys. But out of those three, the Saleen is probably, there's less of them. They don't make as many of them. The manufacturing of them is not nearly as big as the other two. So
is the race that you're racing, is it just a straight 8 mile
yeah,
drag strip?
Yeah, you got your Christmas tree lights, and it goes, yellow, 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 green, and then you get into it and you drag somebody next to you.
If you get caught speeding or anything in that car of yours outside the track, we happen to know the mayor there in Knoxville. He's a good friend of ours.
Yeah. I know Glenn too. Yeah.
I know you do.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Have you been to any of Glenn's events when he does a political deal or anything? Or
we did a charity thing together. Okay. And I just saw him a couple weeks ago at a convention signing, and I wanted to hook up with him for this coming up Christmas. I said, "Are you doing anything like maybe going to a food line and where they give for the homeless or something, and they pass the tray as they walk by, and you put some food in their trays and stuff?" And he said, "I haven't got anything lined up right now." I said, "Well, he said, I'll give you a shout." And what I said, I'd like to join you, and let's just do something where we give back to the community, and for something like the homeless people or something. So, yeah, he said he's just been so up to his head and doing stuff. It's been so busy, especially with COVID and all that around. He's been real busy.
He's the world's biggest mayor. you talk about not aging.
Yeah.
I saw him at I think Undertaker's retirement or something recently, and I forget what it was. And he's as big as he was back in the '90s. I mean,
Yeah.
he looks amazing.
He's
I,
yeah.
I asked him, I said, "Aren't you supposed to age like the rest of us?"
Yeah. He keeps his hair short and he looks just the same guy as 15 years ago.
Ricky, you went up you went up to Atlanta, and
Yes.
you were on that national TV. Is that when Crockett first saw you, or Ole was booking? Was he probably doing the dual booking deal at the time, right?
Well, when I went to Atlanta in '76, Ernesto was the booker.
Tom Renessa, okay.
Tom Ernesto was the booker. And this is what Tom, he told me. He said, Ricky, he said, Jim Barnett likes you a lot. And he said, you're going to, your debut on TV, you're going to work with Dick Slater, who was #1 heel, right? He said, what we're going to do, he said, this first week on TV with Slater, you being the new guy, we're going to have him go over with something cute. Next week, you're going to come back and work with Slater, and you're going to go over. And then the third week, we're going to come back with a rubber match, but we're going to make an angle out of it. So I was kind of excited. I said, wow, what an opportunity, So first week I worked with Slater and put him over, and just went around the Atlanta circuit there that week, wrestling maybe third or fourth match. And then the following Saturday morning, I was looking up at the sheet on the rundown for the TV matches, and they didn't have me matched up with Slater. And so I went to Ernesto and I said, has there been a change? Understand this, I've just now been in the business maybe a year, maybe 10 months. So, you're trying to pick and choose your words so you're not sounding so, offensive. So he said, Ernesto said, no, there's been a change. Wrestling 2, Johnny Walker is going to work with Slater. So, so I spent 13 months in Atlanta, and Ernesto moved on, and that's when Ole came in as booker.
Well, wait a minute. You never got the return with Slater?
Never. Never.
You did a hell of a
bunch
job
of crooked
putting him
wrestling
over.
promoters.
Yeah, he did a hell of a job putting him over for wrestling too.
Yeah.
So snipped that money and said, "There, I'm going with Slater."
And Walker too. He was the top babyface there, right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Wrestling too. He was the top babyface there, so I could see where that and like I said, I was there for 13 months, and those two guys carried on an angle for almost that whole 13 months, working with each other every night, and and spicing it up on TV every weekend. Those two guys drew a lot. So I don't know if I felt relieved or I felt like I got backstabbed, but at that point in time in your career, you just go with the flow.
And wanting to work. You're just wanting to work.
That's all. Yeah, I was happy to have a job.
I think backstabbed would be the best guess.
So,
you know what amazed me?
I think old Johnny Walker was sitting backstage at that TV when you put Slater over that first round and saw that match quality of the match and said, I think I then watch your house show matches, because you guys probably ripped it up at the house show match, and Walker's probably sitting there, I think I could make some money with that Slater. And you're right, he was the top dog there. And John, he got just about whatever he wanted when he asked Barnett to go that direction. So
he was Johnny Walker, the rubber man in Florida.
He when I very first started in the business, he had been out. He was actually come to the ring and do a contortionist act. Did you know he was a contortionist too?
Well, I knew the reputation.
That's the reason he was the rubber man, known as the rubber man. But and then he would pass a hat, John, in the audience, and that's how he got his pay. Promoter wouldn't book him, but he'd allow him to go out there during intermission to put on his act as a rubber man.
And that's how he got started?
That's how he got started, yeah.
And he used that in his career to where challenges would be made to where guys would put a hold on him, and it'd be a hold that nobody got out of, but Walker, the rubber man, was able to wiggle his way out of it, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he would.
For years, he went around as Johnny Walker, rubber man Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
Very similar
then
to
he
like
started-
very similar to like Alexa Bliss. Remember when she did the arm bar angle where, you know, she could bend her arm, you know, way back,
Right.
and looks like it breaks your arm, and they stopped the match, and, you know, same thing. It
So let me-
just doesn't happen very often because not that many people have, you know, stuff like that in their body that is able to move that way.
Johnny could actually contort his whole frame backwards, John.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the front part of it from the waist down would be looking forwards, and his chest and face would be looking backwards.
He can do all the weird things with his arm. I mean, it was amazing. But when I was a rookie, that's how he made his living. He, you know, guys, promoters wouldn't book him as a wrestler; they'd book him as an attraction.
So a abdominal stretch, he could just spin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Till he got dizzy, I guess.
So let me. So here I am. I'm in Atlanta for about 13 months, and Ole's the booker, and he says, "You know, Ricky, you've been here, and it's time for you to move on." And he says, "I know you're under contract with Vern." So at that time, guys, I was paying 10% of everything I made to Vern.
Yeah, that's what Vern did to the kids at camp, right? He signed them percentage.
Yes.
Now, Ricky, did he charge you for camp, and that was the price was the 10%? And for how long was it, or did he charge you also when you came to camp?
Well, like I said, I went there in 1975, and it was $2,000.
Wow. And you
Um,
had to give 10% for what period of time?
he called it a booking fee, because then he would call a
I bet he
promoter.
did.
Yeah, so that, you know, being green and not knowing, you just say, "Oh, okay, that seems to be the norm." And, you know, when I left Minneapolis, he said, "You're going to go back home to Florida, Eddie Graham," you know, so I had to pay 10% of everything I made. And then when I went to Atlanta, 10%. So then when Ole came up to me, and he said, "I understand you're working under Vern." And he said, let me call Vern up and see if he's got a place for you. So he got back, Ole got back with me, and he said, "Vern's got you going to Calgary." So through Atlanta, a wrestler by the name of Dean Ho, his real name is Dean Iguchi.
Yeah, Dean and Tony Greer were.
They worked as WWF partners,
Right.
tag team partners, Gurria and Ho, Dean Ho. And Dean said, "I got a good referee buddy up there in Calgary," because Dean said, I've worked that territory. Let me call him and ask him how the territory is doing." So he did that, and he got back with me. He said, "Ricky," he said, "everybody up there's starving." He said, "Then they're not making any money, and for you to drive 3,000 miles, and you know, and you said you're not going to make any money." He said, "They're not making any money." So I got back with Ole, and Ole got with Vern, and Vern called me up and said, "You know what, you rookie punk kid, what the hell, you know?" He says, "I'm trying to get you a place to go." And I said, "You know, but you know, why would I want to go 3,000 miles when there's other territories between Atlanta and there that maybe, you know, I could work at least just to get by, make, you know, 35 or 50 bucks a night." He said, "They're not even making that up there in Calgary." And so his last words to me were, "Book yourself." So I got back with Ole, and Ole a week later said, "I got you a spot in Carolinas. I got you a spot, you know, 250 miles up the road from Atlanta into Charlotte." So, and as Gerald, as you know, when I went into Charlotte, the rest is history, right?
Right. That's when it
Hey, Ricky,
started.
before you talk about Charlotte, I want to ask you about Vern. How long were you going to have to pay that 10%?
Throughout my whole career.
It was a lifetime. It was a lifetime commitment. That's what I understood.
Yeah. Let me tell you this. Now, I was in Atlanta from 76. I said 1977, I went to Charlotte in March. And around 1975, Crockett, Gerald, as you remember, in 79 and 80, we were doing trips to Toronto, the Maple Leaf Gardens.
Right.
Me and Jay wrestled you and Jack there, right?
Yeah.
So
one time we couldn't go because of a contract dispute.
Right. So I'm there in Toronto, and guess who shows up in the locker room? Vern. And the last time I paid him my 10% was when I was in Atlanta, because I felt when he said book myself and Ole got me into Charlotte, why should I be paying Vern 10%? Because Ole's responsible getting me here. So he says, I understand. Vern says, we're in a locker room. He says, we go up to an empty locker room, part of the building there. And he says, I understand you're doing real well down there in Charlotte, main event. And he says, I'm here because you owe me 10% for the last couple of years. And I said, and I told him the story. I said, Vern, I just want to refresh your memory. You told me to book myself, and I understand this 10% was a booking fee. So if anybody that should be getting any kind of money, it would be Ole Anderson, because he's the one that got me into Charlotte. And I just made this name up out of the blue at that moment. I said, and if you want to carry this discussion any farther, you need to see my attorney. And his last name was a word that we use in our business. And I said, his name is Robert Carney. Bob Carney.
You work to worker.
Bob Carney.
Worker.
Yeah.
Hey, at least you didn't say it's Bob Kizarney.
No, yeah, he didn't talk that, but I just said, you want to take it up? Just take it up with, his name is Robert Carney. He's in Charlotte. Hell, I didn't know anybody named Carney, right? I just threw it out there. Well, I guess to my good grace, it was never pursued after that. So I never had to pay Vern the 10%.
That's just insane to me. I mean, obviously it's not legal, but yeah, I guess if you sign a contract, it might be. But how did he get the money? So if you're booked in Atlanta, did you have to send him 10%, or would he take it directly from the office?
I sent it to him.
So was it an honor system, or did he have
Yes.
to audit it?
Yes, it was an honor system. And in Atlanta, I was on a $300 a week guarantee. So come hell or high water, that's all I made was $300. I could work 6 times, I could work 7 times, I could work 4 times, I could work 5. It was just a straight $300. So every week I was sending them $30.
Wow.
John, that was like the NWA champ. They got that 13%, but they only really got 10%, because the 3% was automatically sent to St. Louis to the NWA.
Yeah.
What was the other 10%?
The 10%, you got the 10% minus expenses and all, minus your airline ticket and all that.
So explain it to me a little. The NWA
Okay,
champ.
the NWA champion was on paper to receive 13%
Gotcha.
off the top, off of your building expenses. It wouldn't be off the top.
Gerald, it was 13% of the house, right?
Of the house, yeah, of the
Yes.
house, of the gross of the house, yeah.
Yes.
13%, no matter what it was. But the breakdown, the champion would receive 10%, and the NWA would receive the other 3%. And that 3%, Sam didn't trust the wrestlers doing it. That's where Jack and Sam had their fallout, of when Jack went to Japan and made that deal like Ricky did on his own, and with Baba to switch the title. But that 3% out of that 13 would go directly from the promotion that was receiving the champion to the NWA. At the end of the week, they just go through all the grosses, add it up, 7 shows, 3%, and send it to the NWA. That was the rules.
Isn't that a little mafia-ish?
No kidding. What the NWA was kind of mafia-ish, man. Ricky can tell you that. I mean,
Well, and
the politics were strange back then. It really was. I mean, it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could bet a dime on a dollar that 3% that was sent to the NWA was never claimed.
Yeah, never.
Right. Yeah, that's a safe bet.
Yes.
A lot of it was cash deals back in those days too, John.
Sure.
You know, you had no Ticketmaster, you had no, automatic tickets. They were just road tickets. So
Yeah,
a
I'll never
lot of shady
forget,
things went on back in those days, brother.
I'll never forget the bookkeeper there in Charlotte. He said every show, Rick, he's got 2 rolls of tickets.
Yeah.
2 big, the rolls, and they tear off. A guy would buy a ticket, they tear off a ticket and give it to you. He said, this roll here is for Crockett and for the exact amount of money, and then this roll over here is for the IRS.
And a lot of times, John, you'd see paper of those ticket rolls. They were old roll tickets that hadn't been sold, that probably had 40 or 50 tickets on it, and they just kind of paper clip it in there and sell it, and it's not a sellable ticket. It's not numerically did. So nobody ever took the time, especially to go through every ticket and match it with the other ticket stub that was sold. Nobody.
That's why guys like Tim White, the referee, was so valuable to Vince when he would do the live events, because he was good at figuring out who was stealing money and who wasn't out of these arenas, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. A lot of
and that guy's very valuable to a guy, because a guy like Tim, you couldn't fool him because he had seen it all.
Yeah. And Tim would probably usually collect the house too.
Right. Yeah. He'd always be in there when they counted it too.
Ricky, that was one time we're up in Toronto, and this might have been the deal. We were supposed to work with you, and there was a situation over a paycheck, and you told us to take off our boots. It might not be wrestling. We said, okay, we're with you guys. We took off our boots too, waited for Ricky to solve his business. He gave us a nod. We laced him back up and went out and ringed him 30, 40 minutes.
You know the story on that? Why that happened?
I've always wondered what the story was.
We were wrestling at the time. Jay and I were wrestling against, this is the only time I ever did this. Jay and I were wrestling Slaughter and Canoodle. And we were in Roanoke in the afternoon matinee show, and we had a private plane to go to Toronto. Well, when we finished the Roanoke show and we got on the private plane, it was a King Air, which was pretty top turboprop King Air. And we were in Roanoke, and the airport's down in the valley. And as soon as we were, Freddie Floyd, the pilot, as soon as we lifted off, and we got 300 or 400 or 500 feet up off the runway, I'm sitting there looking out the window, and this big puff of black smoke, and the right engine went dead. And Freddie gets on the mic and he's calling the tower. He said, we're coming in. He said, we're coming in. If anybody's landing, please redirect them. He said, the words I'll never forget. He said, we're falling out of the sky. With the weight of the wrestler in the plane. And we had not gotten up high enough yet. We had, full throttle, and it took, both engines. So we came around, they landed, and this was on a Sunday afternoon. Of course, there's no mechanic. And so Freddie got on the phone, and he called some people he knew, and a couple of pilots flew up to Roanoke, and we were in a Lear jet. And I'll never forget, we're sitting in the jet, and the pilot looks back over his shoulder at us, and he said, what time are these boys supposed to be in Toronto? He said, well, we're the main event, we're on last, but the show just started as we speak. The show had already started. So we took off, and that son of a gun went straight up in the air, put the hammers down, and we are laid back in that seat. That Lear jet was wide ass open, and we're just, but he got us there. Now we had the match. And as you know, Gerald, whenever you wrestled in Toronto, if you're there at the following show, you got your paycheck from the show before.
Right.
So Jay and I get our paychecks, and I'm looking at it, and I know what kind of money we drew there in Toronto. We almost sold it out every time we wrestled there, me and Jay, right? And I called Tony. I said, what's up with this paycheck? he said, well, to get you guys up here, you know how much it costs for that Lear jet? I said, let me get this straight. We're paying for that Lear jet, and you are writing it off, but it's coming out of our pay. So I said, I'm not working. So Tony says, Ricky, we got to. It was me and Jay against you and Jack. He said, we got a hell of a house out there. He says, man, he says, what will it take? I said, you need to give me and Youngblood, and then you also need to get to Don Kernoodle and Sergeant Slaughter, and each of us $1,000. And I said, you need to get our money for me and Jay tonight in the locker room before we go out in the ring. And it's got to be American. $1,000 cash, American. Tony looked at me and he goes, Jack Tunney, he goes, Ricky, where in the hell am I? You know, this is like, I don't know, 8 o'clock at night now, 9 o'clock at night. He said, where am I going to get that kind of American money cash? I said, Jack, you go in your office, you move that picture that's on the wall to the side and open up your safe. I didn't know if there was a safe there or not. I swear to God, I didn't know. I just said it. I said, you just go up in your office, open up that safe, and you got those ribbons tied around them $100 bills, and you bring me 1,000 and you bring Jay 1,000, and then you give me 2 envelopes with Kernoodle and Slaughter's name on it to make sure they get their money. And he came back with the money, and then me and Jay wrestled Jack and Jerry. That's the only time I ever held up a promoter, only time. But I just thought it was crooked to take it out of our pay, and yet I said you and your company are going to write it off, and yet the boys are paying for it. I said, that ain't right. That ain't right.
So Jerry, this is the first time you've heard this, but you were going to walk out with Jay and Dragon, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we're going to back up. We were going to back up our brothers there. I mean, Ricky said, hey, I'm having some financial issues with Tony, and I might not work, or we're working against them. And we know Tony was, if they don't work, they're going to ask us to work single. They're going to ask us to go out and do something. So Jack looked at me and we shook our head. We're with you, Ricky. We unlaced them and took them off and sat there in the dressing room with our street clothes on until Ricky gave us the nod. And we got back dressed. But yeah, we're willing to, for a brother, willing to.
And John,
good payoff, man. We had packed house outside.
That also
people there.
That also helped with Tony, convincing him when Jack and Gerald took their boots off. So, but that also just added the icing on the cake of, boy, I better get the money to these guys so we can keep the show going.
Yeah, because he's losing his entire main event now.
Yeah,
yes.
Not just half of them, but it's whole main event.
So, Ricky, when you first got to Charlotte, that's where you were kind of, digressed down a couple rabbit trails, which have been very entertaining. Did you know right away that was the place that you wanted to be? I mean, you made such a big name there, with Marley and Flair and all the guys that you had with Jay. I mean, it was, yeah. How quick did you know this was the right move?
I did not. I got there in March and 1977 in June. Flair and I did an angle on TV, and it was only because of he went to bat and told Crockett, and he said, you got this new kid that's come in, Steamboat. I'd like to try and do something with him on TV, and we did an angle on TV, and we were off and running. And, and we ran pretty strong for a couple of years on and off, with each other. And then it was like around 79-ish when I decided to go to tags with Jay and just break away from single competition. I wanted to just do something different. And Jay and I hit it off, and then the fans loved us. And the next thing you know, we're main events as tag teams. So
how did you happen to say no? Jay was the guy, because it was a magic combination. I mean, John, you had two prime baby faces that looked apart, worked apart, and the young loved looking at them. I mean, it was a magical tag team.
well,
How did that pairing
we
come together?
we were doing singles at the time, and we had just started riding with each other, and just through conversation, it just out of the blue. It was nothing really planned. I said, maybe we ought to try being a tag team, And I said, I've been doing singles so far throughout my career, and I'd like to try to do tag team. I always felt that if you get 4 good guys in the ring, they could outwork 2 guys in the ring.
Right.
4 good guys all on the same page with baby faces and heels. I felt that you could really put on a much better and hell of a show than 2 single guys in a single match. Because
through the conversation with Jay and the cars, you guys realized that your philosophy were similar, and you kind of created that bond where it was it was a good mix.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
So your first you guys' first run, was it against Sarge and Don, or
yes?
What?
Yeah.
And John, man, I got to Ricky's horn on this. This was probably Carolinas was famous for tag teams, and this thing that come along with Sergeant Slaughter. Ricky can take into the details, nuts and bolts of it, but he had Don Cornoodle as his private, but these 2 guys clicking as a baby face, and man, it was the greatest tag team rivalry I think that ever produced out of North Carolina, and that's a lot of history there.
Yeah, it was actually Sarge came up with the idea of bringing Don up. Don was a mid-card wrestler, and he decided, he said, I'm going to make you like my private. And so I don't think Don ever won a match on TV. He was a job guy, mid-card. And so when approached Crockett about the idea, and Sarge, let me groom him and show the fans that I am grooming him, and that every week on TV he was getting a little better. So it started out where Don would wrestle on TV, and then he'd still lose, and then he'd lose again the following week, but he would getting a little better, and then he wrestled to a 10-minute time limit draw, his first draw on TV. And then it wasn't too long after that to where Cornoodle had his first win. And it was, Sarge standing on the sidelines, like giving instructions, like a DI, like a drill instructor, and it showed how Sarge was grooming this guy, and he was getting better each week, and then made the challenge to Jay and I. We were the current champions, and we dropped the belt to him right on the first time around, and ended up chasing him.
And how long did that run last with Sarge and Cornoodle?
I'm going to say over 2 months.
As good as a tag team as you are, every tag team makes mistakes. You trusted the Briscoes at one point, and that was probably your biggest mistake.
Also,
let me tell you the story there. When we finally finished up with Don and Sarge, and I think Jack and Jerry approached us and said they'd like to work with us. And
we were in a car ride coming back, and we'd seen all that stuff, and we started talking. We'd never been, we'd won all those championships, but we'd never been world tag team champions or something like that. And then we started asking you how you thought we could do it. You said turn heel, but don't turn heel. Be a baby face, be a heel.
It was, you remember what Crockett said? He said that it would never work.
Yeah. We had Ricky. Well, you go propose it to Crockett because he'll never buy it from us.
Yeah. And he said it would never work because of the big run we just had with Slaughter and Cornudo. How the hell the Brisco's going to follow them guys, right? Being baby faces. And I told Crockett, I said, it's really up to Jay and I to make these guys, make them heels, But, you remember the angle, Jerry? It was, you guys just came out on TV as baby faces and just issued a challenge, just being like good guys. And, you at the time, you guys were like second in line. You were the #1 contenders, even though you guys were baby faces, but it was a simple baby face on baby face challenge.
It was, Ricky, but you know what it was? It also gave the props meeting that they hadn't had. We hadn't had that World Tag Team Championship, and that's what we wanted. So we made the belts the issue more than we made you guys.
Right. Yeah, because we even said that, even out of the ring, we're friends, and so we did the angle to which I think
I had you in the figure 4, and Jay comes in, Jack comes in, Jay chops Jack. Jack hits the ropes as the referee's putting Jay out, and Jack jumps across your legs and injures your legs. Something just really simple like that. Of course, we use this year's being heels that Jack didn't do it on purpose. It's because your partner chopped him and knocked him into the ropes, and the momentum carried him off the ropes onto Ricky's leg. And too bad if Ricky got hurt.
Gerald, that happened the second time.
Yeah.
The first time the figure 4 was there, I think Jack came in to make a save, or no, Jay came in to make a save. Jack met him. Jay chopped Jack, beat him to the punch. And as the referee was trying to put Jay out and he chopped Jack, Jack took the chop, and the chop actually made him fall across the legs.
Right.
And I think the referee caught a glimpse of that, stopped the match. So we came back out on the following week, and I'm wearing a knee brace. And of course, another challenge is met. It's almost the same type of scenario to where figure 4, I think it was you, Jack had me in the figure 4, and it was you that got chopped by Jay. But you didn't take a bump across our legs. You took a bump in the ring. And as the referee's pushing Jay out, you gathered yourself, you looked over your shoulder where the referee was busy, then you hit the ropes and you deliberately did a splash and hit and rolled out. That was a deliberate.
You're a terrible person, Jerry. Terrible.
So
still, there was delayed momentum. I was old, and my reaction time was slow.
and it was through and it was through that they beat us for the belts, and it turned them heel. The fans, and then the rest of it, to make it even easier to work with, whenever they were doing their promos, the only thing Jack would say would be like, "Well, we're going to meet him next week in Greenville. Tell him, Gerald." Right? He would always look at and tell him. Jack would take 10 seconds of the first part of the promo, and then the rest of it he'd hand it off to Gerald, and Gerald would smoke it as a smart ass, Oh my God, he would get so much heat just because of his promos. And next thing you know, we're selling out, and we're doing just as much money as we did with Don Cornoodle and Sergeant Slaughter. It's just as much.
Said it never worked.
That's right, and they said it would never work.
Ricky, the biggest work possibly in the history of this business was Gerald Brisco being a babyface to begin with.
Yeah. He was a natural heel when he was talking on the mic.
Was a natural heel. Was.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
You known him longer than me.
He never had to scream. He never had to scream and holler or nothing like that. But God, just his mannerisms and the smart ass in his tone, you know. Oh God, yeah,
John, it was your old deal, you know, where you're not really healing. You're just telling everybody how good you are, and they're mean it and believing it, you know. Kind of like you did at JBL.
That's right. Jerry and I always joke about that. Heels have to believe they're the good guys.
And you know, I'll tell you this, John, that run in my career, that run with the Briscoes was the most funnest time.
I bet.
It was the most funnest time working with those guys. There was many a times I would be in the corner with Jay in the ring, they're getting heat on him and something's happening and I am just got to cover up because I'm laughing so hard. And my derby, my drum is just bouncing back and forth because I'm laughing so hard. It was the most funnest run I ever had working with the Briscoes.
Yeah.
Hey, Jerry,
that was the bottom line. You know, we had 4 guys out there, and minus mine, we had no egos in the match. It was just 4 guys out there wanting to get a match over, you know, to trying to accomplish a goal. And I think that's the reason we had that cooperation. And I don't ever remember, no, I can't do that, or no, I can, you know, we shouldn't do that, or anything from the either side. You know, if we come up with it, we did it in the match.
Yeah. It was so much fun.
And most of it was called in the ring. You know, we were just, okay, Ricky and Jay's going over tonight, or Briscoes are going over.
You know, that, you know, you're right. You know, right. Gerald, Jay and I got to know each other so well that, you know, in a tag, you say, okay, let's get the heat on Youngblood, give Steamboat to come back, and he does this, this, and this, and then we have the finish. Jay and I got it to where it didn't matter who they got the heat on. If they were supposed to get the heat on me and I give Jay the hot tag, but they happened to get the heat on Jay because the timing was right at that moment to get the heat. And we just knew how to, we just switched partners, you know. Jay, I would, you know, instead of getting the heat on me, they're getting the heat on Jay, and they're going to give me the hot tag, and I knew my role. So it made it so easy that at that right moment, it wasn't like it happens a lot in tag teams where if you get the heat on Jay, but when we sat down and talked about it, we were supposed to get the heat on Steamboat, and then you got the heat on Jay, and then you got to figure out, we got to get Steamboat in, give him a short comeback, cut him off, and then get the long heat on him, you know, and then go the way we talked. But it didn't matter with me and Jay.
No, it did, and same with Jack and I. It just didn't matter. And that you guys worked at this team. But you know, John, this all led up to the first really big show, you know, that they call mega shows. It led up to the very first Starrcade, right, Ricky? And you know, kind of how Jimmy was trying to promote the thing. Or do you remember all those details?
Yes. Well, trying to go beyond a normal territorial level, trying to, you know, and
Greensboro had been so big traditionally throughout history on Thanksgiving Day, but we were trying to figure it out how we could take it to the next level.
Right. And have closed like a closed caption TV audience, you know, for the building next to the Coliseum, to where if we sold out the Coliseum, they would have, you know, the big widescreen setup in the convention center next to it, you know, and continue selling tickets for that, you know, just taking it to another level, you know.
And yeah. What was the time period? That was before Vince put the Survivor Series together to fight the Thanksgiving Day show, right?
Yeah, well,
because that came later when Crockett decided to try to go head up with Vince.
Vince didn't have a counter to this one here. I think a couple of years later, it was when I was already gone away from there, but Ricky was probably still there at the time.
Yeah, we're talking around.
When Vince did that free Survivor Series to run opposite the Starrcade.
Yeah, I'm thinking 83-ish.
Yeah.
And
83
Ricky,
was our, 83
what
was
caused
ours, yeah.
Ricky? You guys were such a good tag team. Did you guys not just think of, say, going to New York or going to Japan, continuing the run? What made you decide that the tag team should end?
We had been together 4 years, and I made the call where I just wanted to get back on a singles matches and try and focus my bid for a world championship. You know, and we just that was my call. That was my call.
And you had such great matches with Harley Race, with Flair, with Sting, with so many incredible talent. What made you decide to leave and go to New York?
Dusty.
That was simple. You had a falling out with Dusty, right, over creative?
It wasn't a falling out. It was just understanding how I was being used. Now, I've been in the Carolinas for going on 8 years, which is kind of unheard of to be in a territory for that length of time. And Dusty came in as the new booker, and Dusty was a booker that also worked. And Dusty, babyface booker, right? So I was like one of the top babyface in the territory, and I started working with Tully Blanchard, and Tully was the national TV champion. We had 60-minute time limits on the main event, but since it was a TV belt, it was only up for grabs for the first 10 minutes, like 10-minute match on TV. So he put me with Tully, who was just brought in by Dusty, and then I'm wrestling Tully, and the 10 minutes are up, and I would go over, but I would beat Tully like in 12 or 15, but I would go home with the win, and he'd go home with the championship. It was after 10. So then they came back after a couple of weeks of that, and they extended the championship to 20 minutes. So I'm working with Tully every night, both in North and South Carolinas and Virginia, and I go over in 21. He goes home with the championship, and I go home with the win, right? And so every week, the people, they see Tully on TV doing his promos with the TV belt, and every week they know that he's got a feud going on with Steamboat, but every week he's still the champion. That means Ricky hasn't beat him or can't beat him, because he's still the champion every week. And so we had a big show in Greensboro, and Dusty booked himself with Tully, and he goes out there and beats him in 8 minutes and becomes the NWA TV champion.
Not the dream.
So then Dusty gets with me, and he brought Nikita in. Now, Nikita's in his first year, Nikita Koloff. And he says, I want to create an angle with you and Nikita. And so on TV in Spartanburg, I'm working with a job guy. I go over, and then what was planned was walking back to the locker room down the aisle, I would turn around and wave at the fans, and Nikita would come out and give me his Russian sickle clothesline, which was his finish, to create an angle. He'd jump me from behind. Well, Nicky at the time, was like 280, man, and he was pumped, and so I get the win. I walk down the aisle, I turn around, and I wave at the fans, and I get this clothesline from behind, and it looked like my head went up into the third row of the upper bleachers. God, I said, oh my God, I never felt getting shot like that before. And but on the way home, I started thinking, this is Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream in USA, and I see the writing on the wall, to which I'm going to go through the territory like I did with Tully and make Nikita look good, who's a Russian. And then it's going to branch off to where it's going to be Nikita, the Russian, against Dusty Rhodes and USA, red, white, and blue. So this was 1985, and I went into the office and I said, Jimmy, I said, I've been here for 8 years, and I said, I appreciate all you've done, but I think it's time for me to go. And that's when I went to work for Vince.
Did Jimmy try to talk you out of it?
Who?
Did Jimmy try to talk you out of it?
No. And that's funny. He understood where I was coming from, and because he knew how Dusty, was going to use me, and he appreciated all that I did for the company for all those years. What's that?
Had you had pre-conversation with Vince when you went in, or was it
no?
You're just rolling the dice, say, I'm gonna tell Jimmy I'm gone.
Yes, and it wasn't a week later, George Scott, who was the booker for Vince, that I got a call from George. He said, I heard you gave your notice. I've been working, at that time, almost 10 years without any time off at all, no vacations, no nothing. And I was looking forward to a couple of months off after I gave my notice to Crockett and Dusty. And God, it wasn't but maybe 2 or 3 weeks later that I was up in Connecticut talking to George and Vince and going to start working with the WWF.
Well, you had experience with George, so you knew George wasn't going to give you no time off once you got booked there.
No, he
no short matches here.
Yeah, but it was.
So did you went up there? When was the Dragon conceived? I mean, when did that come in? You went up.
Vince was kind of stuck on giving wrestlers their names so that he could trademark them and own the name. And when I went up there, I've been in the business for almost 10 years, and the Ricky Steamboat name was pretty established. So Pat Patterson was there. We're at Vince's house, and we was in a roundtable discussion. And I guess the feeling I got is want to add something to it. Add something to Ricky Steamboat. I could keep Ricky Steamboat, but let's add something to it. So I took Taekwondo as a kid. And so that's how I started implementing some of this martial arts stuff that I was doing in the ring. And I was a big Bruce Lee fan. And they had a movie, it was a movie like Return of the Dragon with Bruce Lee or something. And that discussion came up. And so they said, there it is, the Dragon. You could put it Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, or you could put Ricky Steamboat the Dragon, or you could put it in the front. No matter wherever you put it, it works. So it was just through a roundtable discussion. Just prior to going to Vince, I had already trademarked the name Ricky Steamboat and owned the rights to it, only in wrestling related events. And as soon as I left the house and I was at the airport, I called up my trademark attorney. I said, you need to trademark the Dragon for wrestling before Vince.
Did you get it?
I got it. Yeah. So.
Did Vince ever say anything to you like, okay, you got me?
Yes. Two weeks later, I'm doing TV, first TV. We're passing the hallways, and he goes, "You beat me to it." I said, I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, "What are you trying? You got the rights to the Dragon." I said, "Well, I said just business, Vince, just business, Right. No, and the rights to Steamboat and the Dragon, only in wrestling related venues."
And what did he say to you after that? Did he like shrug his shoulders like, well done, or was he hot?
No, he didn't say anything. Didn't say anything.
And so when you get in there with the Dragon, and then the lead up to Savage coming up, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but the lead up to Savage and the match.
Yeah.
You didn't have much interaction with Savage before that, did you?
None. We did the angle in December, end of November, December of '86, to which he jumped me and left me laying. Then he came off the top rope with the announcer's bell on my throat. And so we didn't really have a match. And so I'm doing these little venues, these little skits on TV with a throat specialist, trying to get my voice back, trying to be able to talk. The big question is, am I ever going to be able to come back to wrestle? You know, a lot of times before a big event, a pay-per-view, you work with the guy a little bit to get some, what I call like some tune-up matches under your belt before the big pay-per-view, you know?
Sure.
And so, you know, the WrestleMania 3 in March, so around February, I went to Vince. I said, is Savage and I going to have any tune-up matches, you know, get a chance to hook up with each other? Because, you know, I don't know his pace. You know, I don't, you know, I work with Ric Flair, and he's certainly different than working with a Greg Valentine. You know, everybody has a different pace, right? So, and especially with this being a Mania, you know, the third WrestleMania, and they said, no, you're gonna make your debut at WrestleMania 3. So I got with Randy and I said, you know, we're not having any matches or anything, and we haven't even touched really. So I was able to get back out on the road, and when Savage would be in the ring, I would just walk out to the ring before the match would start and point at Savage and say, I've got my eyes on you for WrestleMania 3, so that all the fans in the building could see that, and then just turn right around and walk back to the locker room. And it was those opportunities that after the show, I would meet up with Randy at his hotel, and we start putting this match together. You know, just trying to do it on a gut feeling. You know, I said, Randy, what kind of story do you think we ought to tell? Well, Reagan, I think since I came off the top rope on your throat, maybe throughout this match you try to go after my throat. You know, redemption. And I said, I said, Randy, that makes perfectly, good sense. I said, but I think that's all the fans would know that Ricky's going after his throat. Ricky's going after his throat. And so he thought for a moment, and well, Dragon, what kind of story do you? I said, I think we just should go out there and just blow the roof off the place and make it a championship match. Just make it a championship match. And so we started to get this match together. And, for me back then, I kind of felt that an average match would have about 7 or 8 false finishes, throughout. That seemed to be the norm. 7, 8, 9 false finishes throughout, the match. And we started putting this match together, and we came up with like 20 false finishes. And I said, man, I said, I don't know about you, Randy, but I got to write this stuff down, and to remember each one consecutively. False finish number 1, number 2, number 3. Now you have to false finish number 14. What's 15? 6, remember them on the get-go, right? So that's what made it different was I think I said, now I feel like this is a championship match because you're trying to keep the belt. I'm trying to beat you for it. And that's what a championship match is all about. We had 20 false finishes.
Ricky, you guys changed the business. That changed because there weren't false finishes, leading championship matches then, one after another like you guys did, leading up to where every false finish looks like the championship is either being retained or being lost. Did you guys at the time think, hey, we're going to put a ton of false finishes in here because the story we're telling is we're trying to win the championship, which seems really basic, but a lot of people don't get that because they get lost in matches sometimes.
Right. Well, I wanted to make it a championship match, and then we started hearing the numbers coming in, like how many tickets sold at the Silverdome, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, 70 to 80, then, it ended up with like 93, 94,000, right? And then the buy rate, for the pay-per-view was coming in. And Jim Barnett was letting me in on that. And he said, Ricky, the viewing audience that are buying this show at home is off the hook compared to the first two WrestleManias, So I just said, Randy, I said, let's go out there and steal the show. I mean, let's wait, I didn't say steal the show. I said, let's have the match of the night. Basically, let's have the match of the night. So that was our goal, to go out there and have the match of the night, not knowing, we're going up against the two biggest icons in the business with Andre and Hogan, right? Two biggest guys in the business. And I remember going to Andre and saying, are you guys doing anything special that, out of respect, because they were the main, out of respect, are you guys doing anything that we need to stay away from? You and Hogan. He said, no. He said, my back, my hips, we're going to do bear hug. So I just did it out of respect for Andre, as
sure.
So it left the door wide open. And I went to Savage and I said, everything we got written down, everything that we talked about, we got carte blanche to. We can roll it.
Ricky, it's two completely different mindsets. So you had the incredible matches, say, with Harley and with Flair, which I doubt you guys probably talked over anything. And then with Randy, who's notorious for wanting to have everything written down, a perfectionist, and terrific in the ring. And you come across with one of the greatest matches of all time. A lot of people say it is the greatest match of all time, but you had to remember so much. Did you enjoy the day? And did you enjoy the moment in the ring? Thinking there's 93,000 people around you. Did you get a chance to look around, or were you so enraptured in having to memorize 20 finishes that you didn't really get to enjoy the moment?
Very true. Very true. I was, once we got the match down on, we wrote it down on these yellow legal tablets, and we had about 250 steps. Step number one. Step number one. I said, Randy, we don't have to write down step number one. Write it down, Dragon, write it down. Step number one, lock up. Lock up. I said, come on, we don't have to write it down. We're going to do it. He said, write it down. So we about 250, and then we got it comprised down to about 160 steps, 160. So once we got the match written down, whenever we ran into each other leading up to the big show, I would quiz him. I said, okay, step number 32 is this, this, and this. Tell me the rest of the match. Well, number 33 is this, and number 34 is this, number 35, and then he would quiz me. So we just keep bouncing back and forth.
Wow.
The day of the show, I'm walking around with just going through the match in my mind. Step number one, step number two, just talking to myself. I was so freaking stressed. It was, and then I'll never forget, they took us down in these carts from the gorilla position down to the ring. They took us down on these carts. And I'll never forget when I first came through the curtain and saw 93,000 people. It was like, holy, it was a moment. But then I sort of just zeroed in on the ring and just focused on the ring and just let everything else just be like background noise, background noise. And I'll never forget, after the 20 false finishes and the 21st one was the 1, 2, 3. I'll never forget where I laid on my back. I looked up at the Silverdome at the very top, and I said, it is done. It is over. I was so relieved. It wasn't fun. It was stress to the nines. More stress than any match I've ever been involved with.
Unbelievable. And did you feel like, I know you two guys have been in some great matches, but you know how it is when you're in a match and things are going really well. And at some point, at least I would think, okay, if I could just not screw this up, this is going to be a really good match, whether it's a house show, pay-per-view, whatever it is. Did you know about, say, 8 minutes in, this son of a bitch is a classic?
No.
But I still got to remember number 72 through 151. And just, if I can just not screw it up, we're going to have something that people are going to talk about forever. Did you feel that way, that
No.
it was working?
No. So focused on the next step, the next number. I will say there were 2 times Savage had a flat line and I had a flat line. Randy says, Reagan, I'm lost. And I would tell him, okay, we're doing this. He said, okay, I got it. And then we go on with the match. And then all of a sudden I said, I'm flatlining Savage. I'm flatlining. What do we do? And he would tell it to me. And then I said, okay, I got it. So we had 2 moments in the match to which we both were lost for a second. And then we carried on and went through the rest.
When did you realize it was a classic?
Well, it was kind of growing on me after the match. All the guys and everybody coming up and saying, what a match, what a hell of a match, what a show. Vince was saying, what a show you guys put on for the company tonight, and and even old timers like Gorilla Monsoon and Arnold Skolin, they would come up and they'd pat us on the back, and you don't see that very often from them, they come and say that was a good match, but I mean, really putting it over. God, how did you guys remember all that? God, what a match. So it started that night after the show, where they had the big party afterwards and you're sitting at your table and stuff. And throughout the whole night, the wrestlers just kept coming up and just praising us on our match.
What did Savage say after the match?
I honestly did not see him until at the afterwards party. And he was also so relieved. He was just so relieved like me. I think I might've started up the conversation where I'm glad it's over. It was so stressed out. Lanny Poffo told me, and Lanny just maybe had told me this about 5 years ago, to where Randy felt that he could top it. He could top the match working with somebody. But what he said, with all the guys that followed us, he was so disappointed because he could never top it. He said he never was able to pull a better match out with whoever he worked with. And he worked with Hogan and he worked with Ultimate Warrior, and it was something that he felt he could do, but was disappointed because he didn't, and he couldn't.
Well, there wasn't many Ricky Steamboats out there to do it with. He mentioned 2 guys.
Yeah.
Their best night, they weren't going to be able to be Ricky Steamboat.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's we all took a lot of pride in our work,
Ricky, what's the answer? Because you guys had what some people call the greatest match of all time, certainly one of the greatest matches of all time. Everybody puts it in that category. And you also had some incredible matches with Flair, with Race, with Sting, with so many different guys. One where you called everything on the fly, and one where you called almost nothing on the fly.
Yeah.
Both are classics. So what's the answer?
John, in its own right, when you put together a match and you're going on your gut feeling, not knowing the outcome, but ending up having a great match. All right, so you have that, and then you have one to where you go into I don't care how many times I worked with Ric Flair to 60-minute Broadways, and the only thing we went in was the finish, which was maybe the last 2 minutes of a 60-minute Broadway, right? You're going to wrestle through, but you set up a bunch of false finishes. Which is the better match? If you put together a match, and which I've seen a lot today, but if the flow of the match and the fans aren't buying it and they're sitting on their hands, but you continue to go through with a match that you put together, that's not good. If there's a match you call on the fly, I'll give you an example. I did an angle with Barry Windham, and I was doing a promo, and he came up and hit me in the back of the head with a chair in the middle of the promo. And I'll tell you a funny part. He had the chair flipped around the wrong way. Instead of hitting me in the back of the head with the flat side, he hit me in the back of the head and caught me with the edge of the chair. It split the back of my head open. I went down, he jumped on top and he starts punching me. And all of a sudden this pool of blood is starting to go around on the floor behind my head. And all of a sudden he goes, you know, he says, he starts off with like, don't you talk to me like that. Don't you, oh my God, I'm sorry, Ricky. I'm sorry, Ricky. I'm sorry, Ricky. But we went off of that angle, and I was being a very aggressive babyface because I wanted redemption, right? I wanted to get even, but you know, we're working the arm drag routine, the old Ricky Steamboat arm drag routine. And about 8 minutes in during my shine, I looked at Barry. I said, Barry, they ain't buying this shit. They're not buying it. They're sitting on their hands. And he says, Richie, what do you want to do? I said, get some heat. Let's get some heat going right now. So on the fly, we changed it, go right to heat. And the next thing you know, the fans are starting to rumble now, okay? And now they're waiting for my comeback. They're waiting for redemption that way. But if we would have sat down in the locker room and put it together A to Z, we would have, you know, and kept going with the flow, the match would have ended up being a big dud. But midstream, we were able to change it and go a different direction. And it ended up turning out pretty darn good. So.
Right. Ray, I don't want to, obviously we don't want to keep it forever. I could ask you about so many things, but I do want to ask you about, I saw Bruce Pritchard do an interview recently about when they took you down to Florida to the guy who came from Coney Island, for lack of a better term, the freak show, the fire breather, to teach you how to breathe fire. And he set his own face on fire as he's teaching you how to breathe fire. You had to be thinking, Bruce, what are you doing to me at that time?
Well, you know, Vince wanted me to learn how to blow fire, and Bruce was being sent down, just, you know, being from the office to oversee it. And I found out earlier that they went to Barnum and Bailey, and their fire breather rejected it because he didn't want to give away his secrets, you know, circus, right? So they got a hold of a guy named Brian LaPalme, and he had like it's like one of those little parking lot carnivals, and we're standing in the parking lot, and the big top, the big tent, it was not fully put up yet, but Brian LaPalme, he was a fan. He was a wrestling fan. He was so excited to show me. So he used kerosene, filled his mouth up with kerosene. But he told me, he said, Ricky, if you ever do it outside, hold your torch up and you look at the flames and make sure that the wind is blowing the flames away from you, so that the wind is always at your back. So so he fills his mouth up with kerosene, and just as he takes that torch and he get ready to blow it, the wind shifted and the wind was blowing in his face, so he blew the kerosene, went into his face, and now I see this guy running around the parking lot with his face on fire.
and that's who Bruce got to teach.
Too bad
you
it
how to
wasn't
breathe
Pritchard.
fire.
Too bad it wasn't Pritchard.
And I looked at Pritchard, and I said, now Brian LaPalme told me that he's been doing this circus act for 10 years. I said, you see that 10-year veteran running around with his face on fire? I said, you call Vince up, tell him, and right now I'm telling, I ain't doing it. I'm not doing this. And so Brian, he came back and his face was rosy red. And he said, no, everything's okay. It's just like a real bad sunburn. It's just, superficial, real bad sunburn. He said, I just want to, I want to teach you. So we started off with little shot glasses, and then we ended up, and then we finished that day. I came back the next day, and then I started doing cupfuls inside the tent because the big top was finished, and learning how to blow fire that way. But there was a moment to which I was watching a 10-year veteran fire breather running around with his eyebrows were gone, his scalp was burnt halfway back to the middle of his head. The next morning we showed up for round number 2, and he was living in like one of those little Scotty trailers that you tow behind your car, the little trailer. So I knocked on his door, and he showed up. He had all these huge water bubble blisters on his face, and he started popping them, and he was laughing. He said, I just saved it so I could show you. I just wanted to get a laugh out of you, and then all these big water bubble blisters.
What was Bruce saying?
He didn't say anything. His mouth was down to his jaw had dropped down to his knees when he saw the guy running around with his face, and came back with no eyebrows and half his scalp burned off.
Bruce didn't volunteer to do it first, right?
Oh no,
no. Because you talked to Bruce about it. Well, I had to show Ricky how to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Ricky, you were a babyface your entire career, and you worked with the greatest heels in the business.
Yeah,
like Rick Rude to me was always the epitome.
John, real quick, one of my, everybody talks about WrestleMania 3. They talk about the trilogy matches I had with Flair, and the one in Chicago when I won the championship and all that. Third match on my list, and I've had close to 5,000 matches. The third match on my list is the one with Rude. It was Bash at the Beach, Iron Man match, to where you had a 30-minute time limit, and the guy with the most falls in the 30-minute would be declared the winner. That is a real close third of all my matches. And then I divide the category up, going into with Jerry and Jack and the tags. That was the most funnest period in my wrestling career, where I really enjoyed my work, and I really enjoyed the guys I was working with. But that was a period in time to which nothing could go wrong, and it is always going away with a good feeling and a pat on the back and saying what a show, and we had so much fun doing it. That's what Jay and I would talk about on the way home, But that match with Rick Rude, Iron Man, 30 minutes. We designed it to which he had 4 falls and I had 1. I was down 4-1, and there was like 6 or 7 minutes left out of the 30 minutes. And even the announcers were saying, well, Steamboat's down 4-1. There's only 6 minutes left. There's no way. But the way we orchestrated, and I'm making a comeback now, it's 4-2, 4-3. Oh, I tied it up 4-4. And then I pull out the 5th fall with like 20 seconds left, to win the Iron Man. But it's just the way we told the story. And John and Jerry, storytelling as we knew it, I don't see a lot of in today's matches. The being able to go out there and tell a story.
Yeah, as Steve Kern says, it's more movement than emotion. And they have a lot of movement and very, very talented, but you don't see a lot of emotion. You see it out of a few guys, that have been around for a while, and some of the guys that just inherently somehow have it. But for the most part, you don't see the emotion. You had so many big moments full of emotion, winning the championship, the tag team with Jay, the match itself at WrestleMania 3, the times with Rude, with Jake the Snake, was so many great. You wrestled the best, and you were the best for so long. How do you classify these moments in your own mind is it all just kind of segmented like, hey, that was a good time with Jay, this is a good time with singles? Or do you have
No.
like a list of that was my greatest moment or my top three?
No, they're all up there. I mean, you could put them in a hat and pull it out and say, yeah, that was, for me, that was my greatest time. But I always believed this old saying that my father taught me, and he said, son, you're only good as a tool that you have to work with. And that was a carpenter's saying, you know, a carpenter is only good as a tool that he has to work with. And I said it in my Hall of Fame speech, that phrase, and I said I had the best tools in the business to work with in reference to the heels that I worked with. I worked with the best heels. So that was something that always stuck with me, that you're only good as the tool you got to work with. So I'm in the ring with a 5-star heel, I'm going to have a 5-star match, you know.
How was Rude? I knew Rick a little bit when I came in WWE, and I just thought the world of Rick as a heel. How was Rude when you worked with him?
Very open, you know, for suggestions. Easy to work with, you know. There was I think we were working in Toronto, and there was a cage match, and he went to suplex me, and he said, block it. And then he turned us around. He said, now suplex me and get my legs hooked up on the top of the cage. So I got him in a suplex position, and as I raise him up, he hooks his legs up on the top of the cage behind the knees, and now he's hanging upside down. And he's saying, go hit the ropes and come back with a cross body. So I go hit the ropes, come back with a cross body. He's got his back against the cage, right? He's hanging upside down. And do it again. So I do it again. One more time. And just as I came for the third time, he does a sit-up. So I crash and burn in the cage. I hit the cage and I slide down. Now I'm laying in between the cage and the ring apron. He lowers himself down and looks down at me. He says, I got you. I got you. I got you.
That's great.
But that wasn't called in the locker room. That wasn't put together. He said just on the fly. And I never seen it done before. But I guess he figured that he could do it, you know, and go to suplex him, and he'd hook his legs up there in the top. And then, so I guess he had that spot lined up and didn't know if it was going to work until actually we were in the match.
To be a veteran, when Rick came along there in the Carolinas, and I saw his first few matches, and it was so amazing how this guy just developed and kept on developing. He had a mindset a lot like yours, Ricky, where he wanted to be the best. He knew that was in his head, and he knew it was in his ability. And this guy, every night we traveled with him, he would just bleed my brother and I for information. He was constantly trying to learn. So you had a who's who of opponents there, and man, we were blessed to come along at that time.
Yeah, that was a golden period in our business, I think, Jerry. You know, starting from early 80s all the way up through maybe mid 90s or something like that, and then you had the attitude period, right, John?
Yes. Wonderful period.
Yeah, attitude period took over, and they slam dunked that great business during that time too. During that
Ricky,
attitude.
man, you know, we've had you on, and man, and we've heard some great stories, and I've known you forever, and I've heard some stories that I hadn't heard before. We really appreciate your time. I know it's tough to sit there, and the fun part was you, me, and John had to figure out how to get on this thing today. So we appreciate all your time. You have a great weekend, man, and go Volunteers.
Yeah, go Volunteers. Yeah, but they had a better season this year than last.
Rocky Top.
If not, complain to the mayor of Knoxville. He can do. He should be playing right now for the Volunteers.
He looks as good as any. And a re-election coming up for him, John. Didn't he say he had a re-election campaign?
It is. I'm not sure when it is, but he does have a re-election come up, and that's when he's term limited out, where he can only run one more time.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks you guys.
Hey, Ricky, thank you so much. Appreciate
Okay.
it, man. You've always been a fan, been a longtime friend of yours as well, and I appreciate both very, very, very much. And thanks for coming on the show and telling us to talk about so many incredible times of our history.
You know,
me and Jerry have been looking forward to this, so thank you.
this is the first and only Zoom that interview that I've done.
Well, thank you.
We got the dragon on.
That's it. Okay. Thanks, you guys.